Well, I'm not going to mention her name because I don't know it. And I'm not going to show you a picture other than this one, which I've blurred the face out for reasons that might be clear for you in a moment. But the person I am talking about is somebody who is an American hero on the level of just about anyone I've ever heard of, and certainly deserves recognition and doesn't look like she's going to get it. At 6:15 in the morning last Thursday, the 21st of May, a car pulled up to the entrance at Corpus Christi Naval Air Station. On duty was a young woman who was the guard at the gate. The gentleman pulled up, stopped at the gate, rolled down his window, pulled out a handgun, and shot her square in the chest. He then proceeded to run through the gate and was about to go into Corpus Christi Naval Air Station. He had a bunch of weapons with him. He was going to kill as many U.S. service people as he could. But I don't think he'd reckoned exactly on who he was dealing with, because this young lady in question, even though she'd been shot wearing a Kevlar vest, immediately rolled over, got to her knees, and hit the emergency button that brings up the anti-intrusion pylons. They basically come out and stop any cars from coming in and doing suicide runs. She then grabbed her service automatic and started putting rounds into the car. Other security personnel arrived quickly. Nobody's really sure who exactly finished off the jihadi who was in the car. But in any event, Memorial Day, which was just a few days afterwards, would have had a considerably larger list of names for us to be memorializing if it hadn't been for the courage and the bravery of this woman. Steve, the woman's name has clearly been withheld. I've looked at the 3 or 4 stories I could find on this. It clearly happened. And I decided, since her name was withheld, and since I'm not 100% sure this is the picture, I decided to blur the face too. The reason the name was withheld was because of fears of retribution. This is commonly the case with SEAL operators and people who've had direct conflict with Islamic terrorists. But I am as impressed by this story as anything I've heard in a long time, and I just wanted to get your take on it, because she's likely to remain anonymous for the foreseeable future, maybe forever, for her own safety. But I wanted to say that I have just absolutely undiminished, unparalleled respect and admiration for this young lady, for this young sailor who did her duty and then some. Yeah.
She took a round to the chest. I don't care if you're wearing Kevlar or not. You're doing your job. It's a pretty low risk job. You're just, security guard at a Navy base. Not a whole lot happens. Just check IDs, whatever. Out of nowhere, just out of the blue, a guy pulls a pistol and shoots her square in the chest. Not only did she get right back up, which I don't know if I could do that, but she then proceeded to do exactly what you just told us she did. And holy cow, she's one of those people that's never going to have to buy her own beer again. You can guarantee that. She can walk into any bar on or near any military installation in the Western world and be saluted. Well, maybe. Yeah. And let me explain this. This is what's really frustrating. This is one of the things that really pisses me off about the jihadis bringing their war to us. We can't celebrate our heroes the way we should. This woman is a bona fide hero. If this were World War II and we're fighting the Germans or the Japanese, she'd have gotten her own parade. She'd get in her own newsreel next week. Yeah, and her own parade and all the rest, because you take your people who do things like this and you celebrate them. But now that there's no front line, now that there's no, there's not going to be a VE day or a VJ day for the war on terror. We're just going to have to keep mowing the grass, as you say, Bill. We have to keep our heroes in secret. We can't celebrate the very best among us, and it's awful. And even if we could, Google News and Bing News are attuned to the stories that I find interesting and want to write about, whether it's at PJ Media or at Instapunter, the stories I want to talk about here at BillWhittle.com. And this story briefly came up on my radar on Thursday or Friday of last week. And I thought, made a little note, oh, yeah, I need to look for that on Monday or Tuesday morning so I can write about it. And over the weekend, we had friends over and all that kind of stuff. I forgot about it. And I completely forgot about it, Bill, until you mentioned it during the backstage. because nothing showed up in any of my finely tuned news aggregators. This thing just got buried. So I have the feeling, Bill, that even if we could celebrate our heroes like this, our media would much rather just take a pass on it because, well, I won't say they're on the other side, but they're certainly not on ours.
That's exactly the segue I was looking for, Scott, because the anonymity imposed upon her for her safety is understandable and goes to her safety, which is important to me, and is honorable. She's a target now because of her actions in defense of this country and the people that defend the country. But what's not honorable and what's not understandable and what's not justifiable is the fact that this news story absolutely vaporized. It just didn't exist. It's like it never happened. You could tell the story without showing her face. You could tell the story without mentioning her name. God knows we get the name of every single mass murderer in this country. We get their names, their pictures, their backgrounds, where they went to school, interviews with everybody. But they could have told this story, but they didn't. And I think the reason they didn't tell this story, the mainstream news media, is two-part. Part of it, of course, is that there is no such thing as Islamic terrorism. Everybody knows that. And any stories that may contradict that narrative, especially on military bases, is swept under the rug. I think another reason that the story wasn't picked up, let alone broadcast, not even covered, is because, after all, it's only a military base, and those are just the poor wretches who couldn't succeed in real jobs, and we don't really care too much about them anyway. But I think the main reason is the jihadi thing, and I think also that here's a woman who used a gun to do her duty, to perform as the kind of action hero that Scarlett Johansson wishes that she was, and gets paid an extraordinary amount of money to pretend to be, and others like her. And yet, this is a non-event. It's a non-event. If this guy had shot up 30 people in a mall, it would be a story we'd never hear the end of. If he shot up 30 people on a military base, it would be a lot more quiet than that. What do you have to say about all of that?
Well, I think we have two factors here. One is the question of whether the media covers things. The other is how those stories get amplified. And frankly, the media could cover something, but it would still not get any attention if it didn't get picked up and echoed and amplified and rebroadcast on Twitter or Facebook or any of the other social media platforms. The New York Times actually covered the story under a headline called "Shooting at Texas Base Was Terrorism Related," FBI says. And then in the subhead, it said the gunman was killed and a member of the base's security force was injured in the attack at an entrance. It goes on to describe that base personnel returned fire after the gunman fired shots at somebody. It doesn't go into detail about, it has no identifying stuff about the person who was at the guard station. It doesn't even say that she was a woman. It just treated it as base personnel. That story came out on the 21st. The curious thing to me is why it didn't get multiplied and amplified. You would expect that you wouldn't be able to turn around without hearing the story of the heroic woman who, was able not only to defend herself, but defend others, and the role of women in the military. And there are a lot of people even who don't really, or not cheerleaders for the U.S. military, but still think that it's a great wrong that we don't have more women in the military. And this would seem like an ideal story for them. Why they didn't find it appealing, it could be for some of the reasons that you suggest. It involved a gun. It involved the U.S. military. It was not as important because it was on a base rather than in a shopping mall. But, certainly this person is a hero. The New York Times did its basic primary reporting on that. I don't know if other major papers did it as well. But it didn't, Steve's right. I read news feeds religiously. Actually, I have 3 or 4 different news feeds I read, and it did not pick up on this story over the last several days. So that does strike me as curious. I'm a little more reluctant to assign attribution to why and motivations there too, but it is disturbing.
It's a great movie called Glory about one of the first black regiments in the Union Army and its attack on Battery Wagner during the Civil War. And the black soldiers in that unit, I want to say it was the 54th Massachusetts, not 100% sure about that, but I think that's right. The black soldiers, needless to say, had to deal with the hatred and the prejudice of the Confederates they were fighting, but they also had to deal with the contempt of large numbers of the Union soldiers who wore the same uniform as they did. And then the fight at Battery Wagner happened, and the 54th Massachusetts, if I got that right, went into battle and suffered horrible casualties. They didn't take the fort, but they performed with exemplary courage and bravery. And for the white soldiers who were watching this, they realized that these are men. These aren't animals. These aren't property. This isn't subhuman. These are people. These are men. These are heroic men. And on an article about this from George Will in Newsweek magazine, I remember this one of the first articles I ever read, made me think, my God, maybe I'm conservative. George Will said that the reason that movie is so powerful in an age where people are demanding respect and wanting carve-outs and quotas and so on, Will said that the only antidote to prejudice is excellence. And I think that really hit it right on the head. Same thing's true for the Red Tails, the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II. They never lost a bomber. I have had serious doubts about women in certain aspects of the military. There's no question they make excellent pilots. I personally know combat helicopter pilot, and I know a number of other women who've done superb jobs in that kind of thing. But to be perfectly honest with you, I had my doubts about whether or not this kind of a job is appropriate for women to do. Those doubts have completely fled my mind now. I didn't say they couldn't do it. I just didn't know. I wasn't sure. Now I am. I don't know if it's possible for your friends to get you a copy of this episode, Ms. I should probably just say sailor, because that's really what you are. But what you did out there deserves national recognition. And if you don't get it, you need to keep in mind one thing. The people, I want to make sure I get this right. What is that line, guys? Is it the people that care don't matter, or the people that matter don't care? There's something like that. In any event, I apologize for choking on the line. The people who have ignored you are not important. The small number of people who are aware of what you did and feel the same way I do are the people that count, because they fully understand what it is that you did, and that was your only life, and you didn't have to get back up again when you'd been shot in the chest, but you did. And on behalf of all the Americans I know and all the people in the military I know who see this story, congratulations to you. Thank you. You have our undying admiration and respect and gratitude. And every one of us is just very, very proud that you're an American and that you're on our side. Go Navy. For Steve Green and Scott Ott, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week right here on Right Angle.